I cannot believe what just happened. Fable and Mythos, both gone. The US government, citing national security authorities, has issued an export control directive to suspend all access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5 by any foreign national. And I'm going to explain exactly what that means, whether inside or outside the United States, including foreign national Anthropic employees. The net effect of this order is that we must abruptly disable Fable 5 and Mythos 5 for all our customers to ensure compliance. Access to all other Claude models is not affected. We apologize for this disruption to our customers. We believe this is a misunderstanding and are working to restore access as soon as possible. And I'm going to get into the full blog in a moment, but there's a few things that I want to point out here. First, what is a foreign national? It's basically any non-US citizen, which is crazy because there are obviously a ton of green card holders, just as an example, in the United States that work for these large tech companies, including people like Andrej Karpathy, one of the greatest minds in artificial intelligence, who just about 2 weeks ago joined Anthropic. And so how is Anthropic supposed to enforce this rule? How are they supposed to know whether someone's a citizen or a non-citizen when they're just using the API? They're going to have to do things like know your customer, which is what financial institutions have to do. They basically have to gather all of this information about their customers to help report on different financial crimes. Now, are AI companies going to have to do that? The net effect of this order is we must abruptly disable Fable 5 and Mythos 5. Within a minute of this tweet dropping, Fable 5 and Mythos 5 stopped working. I literally had 10 different agents running on Fable 5 right when this tweet went out, and they all just stopped. But let me tell you something. This is a self-inflicted wound on Anthropic. Now, some of you might think that this is actually a big marketing W, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But from my perspective, this is a big problem. Anthropic is now serving millions of customers with Fable 5, and all of a sudden, all of those customers have to scramble and figure out another model to use. But I said this is self-inflicted. Why? It all started with this. Project Glasswing. This is the first time that we heard about Mythos. This was a few months ago. And Anthropic, in the most Anthropic way, said, hey, we have this new training run. We have this new incredible frontier model called Mythos, and it is so good, we can't even release it. It is too good at cyber attacks, cyber defense, and you can't use it. We can use it, by the way. We can use it. We got it. We're trustworthy enough. We're the good guys here. So we're going to use it, but we're not going to release it. Well, actually, maybe we'll just choose a handful of other companies that we deem good enough to use this model. But none of you others can use it. And this is fear-based marketing. And because they took this tactic of saying it's too dangerous to release, everybody wanted to use it. Everybody was talking about it. And then just before they talked about Project Glasswing, they also had their little scuffle with the Department of War. Anthropic put a line in the sand saying, no, the Department of War cannot use our models for fully autonomous weapons and to do mass surveillance on US citizens. And the Department of War said, no, we don't want you to tell us how to use your models. We're going to follow the letter of the law. And so the government deemed Anthropic a supply chain risk. This was a very big deal. The first time a US company had been deemed a supply chain risk. So all of this was happening, and then fast forward to just last week. Anthropic launches Fable 5, which is basically just Mythos, but with a classification model on top that prevents people from asking about cybersecurity questions, bio questions, nuclear questions. It kind of is a neutered version of Mythos. It's still incredibly powerful. Don't get me wrong. It's the best model I've ever used. But again, this is more of that fear-based marketing. It's, hey, we have this Mythos version we can't give you, but we'll give you this one over here. And then that brings us to now. The US government told Anthropic non-US citizens can't use it. Of course, if they talk up how dangerous this model is, how only they are good enough to use it and good enough to deem others who can use it. Of course, the government is going to look at it and say, well, maybe non-US citizens shouldn't use it. Okay, and here is where the story gets wild. It turns out the government decided to make this decision because they found out that Fable can be jailbroken, which is kind of like finding out the sky is blue, because every single model ever can be jailbroken. Obviously, the rate of being able to jailbreak these models continues to decline, but they are human-like in that sense. They can be convinced to say things that they shouldn't. That is the nature of artificial intelligence in its current form. That's why I was a little bit surprised to see that the government found out that these models are jailbreakable, because all models are jailbreakable. And there's nothing different about Mythos. There's nothing different about Fable. But what's crazy is that the government did find out. And apparently, it was an Amazon employee who told them. Listen to this. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The jailbreak research in question was done by researchers at Amazon who used a series of prompts to get Anthropic's model to provide them with information about a handful of security vulnerabilities, said chief executive with the cybersecurity firm Luda Security. Anthropic shared a copy of the report with her, she said. And breaking, just as of a few minutes ago, the information reports that the Amazon CEO himself, Andy Jassy, was amongst the tech leaders to push the Trump administration to consider the severe security risks of Mythos and Fable. So according to the information, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy was among the tech leaders who raised concerns to senior Trump administration officials this week about security risks in Anthropic's most advanced models, according to two people familiar with conversations. The calls between the head of Amazon, one of Anthropic's biggest investors and vendors, and the officials in the last few days helped set in motion the Trump administration's new export restrictions on Anthropic's Claude Mythos 5 and Fable 5 models late Friday night. This is unbelievable. So, has nobody heard of Pliny the Prompter? I mean, he literally jailbroke it within hours of the model being released. Here it is, Pliny the Liberator, jailbreak alert, Fable 5 liberated. I mean, this is literally what he does. He jailbreaks every single model that comes out within hours of it, and generally within minutes. All right, now let me go through the full response blog post from Anthropic about the government banning non-US citizens from using these models. So one, they received the directive from the government at 5:21 p.m. Eastern. So within 3 hours of receiving that directive, they shut down the model, which is kind of insane to think about. Imagine all of the companies that are so dependent on the model and they just flip a switch and that's it. They no longer have access. The letter did not provide specific details of its national security concern. Well, it's possible that these things can be jailbroken. You told us how dangerous they are. So why would we want foreign nationals using it? And they told them, listen to this. The government believes it has become aware of a method of bypassing or jailbreaking Fable 5. We reviewed the demonstration of this specific technique being used to identify a small number of previously known minor vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities all appear relatively simple, and we have found that other publicly available models are able to discover them as well without requiring a bypass. So there's a few things here. One, again, all models are vulnerable to jailbreaking. There's no preventing it. There's just minimizing it. Two, it's fairly straightforward to get the models to talk about bioweapons, to talk about nuclear reactors, to talk about things that they really shouldn't. And that kind of information is generally available online anyways. But where it actually does become dangerous is when the model is so good at cyber capabilities that it's able to discover vulnerabilities in software that nobody else knows about. But here's the thing, Mythos, Fable, they're not that much better than GPT 5.5 at doing so. But of course, again, the self-inflicted nature of this wound for Anthropic, all of the fear-mongering that they have done around how dangerous Mythos can be in the wrong hands, they are getting a taste of their own medicine now. And guess who's not? OpenAI. OpenAI is still serving a model that is nearly as good, and I guarantee GPT 5.6 is going to be even better at these types of capabilities. And they're going to be jailbreakable just like every other model on the planet. So here's some other information that we found out from this blog post. Obviously, Anthropic have instituted strong safeguards that greatly reduce the likelihood that Fable is misused. However, it's not perfect. It can never be perfect. That is the nature of these models. In the weeks leading up to the launch of Fable, Anthropic worked with the US government, the UK, AISI, multiple private third-party organizations, and internal teams to red team Fable safeguards for thousands of hours in total. I wonder if they worked with Pliny. I don't think they did, and they really should have, because he can jailbreak any of these models. There is no preventing Pliny from Plinying. And these tests showed that Fable safeguards are substantially more effective than those of any previously deployed model. But here's the thing. If the capabilities of this model are so much better than every other model, that negates the fact that the safeguards are also better. It only takes one time to get a critical vulnerability out of Fable to have massive damage on the United States. No testers have yet been able to find a universal jailbreak, which means a single jailbreak that just works every single time. That doesn't exist, and that's okay. It's not really necessary to exist. Again, you only really need to get it to reveal sensitive information once. Now, a lot of people are also saying that this is a huge W in terms of marketing. And yeah, I guess in a way it is. A lot of people are going to read about this. In fact, this post by Anthropic already has 66 million views in less than 12 hours. So here's Ryan Peterson, the CEO of Flexport. Such great marketing reminds me of when this shoe company got the NBA to ban their shoes for making you jump too high. That's exactly what this is. Right? A lot of people are going to find out about it. A lot of people are going to say, wow, it was such a good AI model that the government had to ban it. I got to try that out. Why would I use OpenAI's non-banned models? I mean, they can't be as good. They're not banned. And I actually think that makes a lot of sense. But I do believe the disruption to Anthropic's business is going to be far worse than any marketing they receive. Remember, Anthropic just confidentially submitted their S1, basically setting themselves up to go public. This is almost certainly going to delay that because now they are not selling a product. They are now selling a national security threat. This is much different. This changes the calculus completely. And of course, the SEC is a government organization, so they have to take this into consideration. Investors have to take this into consideration. So here's the Department of War's CIO, Chief Information Officer Kristen Davies. We fully support POTUS and the Secretary of War in prioritizing national security and the security of our warfighters, DIB partners, critical infrastructure, international parties, and allies. Here's the most important part. Some things are simply more important than revenue cycles, clickbait, and pre-IPO valuation. She is specifically saying, Anthropic, you did this to yourself. By the way, I don't necessarily agree with the ban. Just to be clear about that, I think finding a very narrow vulnerability, a very narrow jailbreak in these models is not enough to warrant banning them. And also the broad brush in which they did it. Any non-US citizen can't use it. There is truly no effective way to enforce that. So what happens next? Well, almost certainly their IPO is going to be pushed back. What we're probably going to see is in the next 1 to 2 weeks, they're going to work out a deal with the government and we're going to get Fable 5 back. I'm willing to bet on that. This is the tried and true Trump administration playbook. Make some extreme decision, then negotiate and come back somewhere in the middle. That's what they do. They might require Anthropic to more aggressively collect information about their customers, which would be a major pain for Anthropic. But at the same time, Anthropic might actually be down with it because that's easy for them to do when they're a $1 trillion company. They have all the funding in the world. They have a massive employee base, but that's actually going to hurt startups looking to compete with them in the future. That's also known as regulatory capture. So maybe Anthropic and Dario are playing a little bit of 4D chess here. And they kind of knew the government was going to do this, and they knew that they were going to tighten restrictions. In fact, Anthropic is kind of known for being super aggressive with regulatory capture. In fact, just a couple days ago, Dario released an essay called Policy on the AI Exponential, basically saying the government is not keeping up with how fast AI is evolving. And they laid out all of these regulatory frameworks that they thought the US government should employ to safeguard against AI development. And this is regulatory capture. They literally said, hey, do this to us. And the government was like, all right, we'll do it. And then Dario is, whoa, what happened there? We don't agree with this. And so this actually marks an important point in the timeline of artificial intelligence. We are now at the point at which the government and the general population looks at these models as national security threats, not as tools. This is a really bad thing because now every model after this is going to be viewed through the same lens. How is this going to hurt the US? How is it going to hurt our allies? Not how is this going to help humanity? How is it going to increase productivity, increase GDP, increase the wealth of the world? The conversation was already extremely negative. The perception of AI was already extremely negative, especially in the United States, and this makes things so much worse. Now, I've made multiple videos about Anthropic's fear-based marketing. Here's one right here you should check out because it's extremely relevant to this topic.